I didn't find out my wife was hiding a second phone by going through her things. She dropped it right in front of me, and somehow still managed to make me feel like I was the problem. Our dog knocked her purse off the kitchen chair. Something hit the floor hard enough to echo, and before I could even process what I was looking at, she moved faster than I've ever seen her move in 9 years of marriage. Not scared, not shocked, controlled, but not fast enough. I picked up a black phone I had never seen before, and when I looked at her, there was this split second where neither of us spoke, like reality had glitched. And then she smiled, calm and almost amused, and said, "Why are you acting weird? It's for work." Like I was the one holding something dangerous. We have been married 9 years, together for 12, and until tonight I would have told anyone we were solid, the kind of couple that had already survived the hard parts. We had routines, inside jokes, the same Friday takeout order the restaurant knew by heart, all the boring, safe things that make you believe nothing can really break you. But for the past month, she had been different in a way I kept explaining away because I didn't want to be that paranoid husband. She started turning her phone away from me, sleeping with it under her pillow, snapping at simple questions, and then switching back to sweet 10 minutes later like she was resetting the scene. Every time I asked if something was wrong, she would look at me like I had just insulted her and say, "You really think I'm that kind of person?" And somehow I always ended up apologizing. The second I unlocked the phone, everything about her changed. She dropped the fake confusion and stepped toward me, her voice low and sharp. "Give it back," she said. "You don't get to go through my things just because you're insecure." I asked her why a woman with nothing to hide needed a secret phone, and she actually laughed like it was funny. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she said. "You turn everything into something ugly. This is why I can't talk to you." My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it, but then a message lit up on the screen before she could grab it back. Just one line, simple and quiet and devastating. "Can't talk tonight. He's still awake." I felt something tear inside my chest when I read that, like my body understood before my brain could catch up. I asked, "Who is he?" Even though I already knew what that meant, and she didn't even hesitate. She crossed her arms, leaned back against the counter, and looked at me like I was exhausting. "You need help," she said flatly. "You see one message and suddenly I'm cheating? That's actually scary." Then she built the lie right in front of me, smooth and effortless, saying it was her friend, saying he was the friend's husband, saying I was spiraling, saying this is why she couldn't be honest with me in the first place. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "The worst part is you actually believe your own delusions." Then my real phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from my brother asking if we were still coming to his barbecue tomorrow, and the second she saw his name on my screen, something broke through her expression for just a fraction of a second. Not guilt, not surprise, panic. Just one tiny crack before the mask came back. But I saw it, and now I can't stop thinking about the fact that he's been at our apartment almost every weekend for the past 2 months, sitting at our table, laughing with us, drinking with me. And for the first time that night, I realized I might not just be losing my wife. I might be losing my brother too. The second her expression cracked when she saw my brother's name, everything inside me shifted from confusion to something colder, more focused, like my brain finally stopped protecting me and started connecting things I had been ignoring. I looked back at her, really looked this time, and said his name out loud, slow and deliberate, and she flinched just enough to confirm it before she could rebuild that perfect mask. Then she shook her head like I had just insulted her in the worst possible way and snapped, "That is disgusting, even for you. You're seriously going to drag your own family into your paranoia now?" I remember laughing, but it didn't sound like me. It sounded hollow, like it came from somewhere outside my body, and I said, "You just reacted to his name like I caught you doing something." And she immediately turned it around, stepping closer, pointing at my chest like she was the one being attacked, saying, "No, I reacted because I'm realizing how little you trust me." "This is what you think of me? That I'd do something like that with your own brother?" The way she said it was almost convincing, like she was offended on a moral level, like I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I should have backed down like I always did, but I couldn't unsee it, and I couldn't unhear that message. I held the second phone tighter and said, "Then unlock it and prove me wrong." And for the first time, she hesitated. It was small, barely a second, but it was there. And then she sighed like I was exhausting her and said, "I don't have to prove anything to you. Relationships don't work like that. If you trusted me, you wouldn't need proof." That line hit me harder than anything else because it sounded so practiced, like something she had said before, just not to me. I told her I wasn't asking for trust anymore. I was asking for the truth, and that's when she changed tactics completely. Her voice softened, her shoulders dropped, and suddenly she looked tired, almost fragile, like she was about to cry, and she said, "You're scaring me right now. I don't recognize you," like I was the one who had brought chaos into our home. She reached for my arm, and I pulled back without thinking, and I saw it again. That flash of something dark in her eyes. Not sadness, not fear, something closer to anger that I wasn't playing my role anymore. Then she whispered, "If you don't put that phone down right now, you're going to regret it." And it wasn't a threat in the loud, obvious way. It was quiet, controlled, like she already knew exactly how this was going to go. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I forced myself to look at the screen again. And just as I did, another message came through, and this time it wasn't hidden behind a name. It was just one word. "Miss you." That one word felt heavier than everything else, like it carried a history I wasn't allowed to see, like it meant something ongoing, something real, not just some twisted misunderstanding she could talk her way out of. I looked up at her slowly, holding the phone between us like it was evidence in a trial, and said, "Miss you? Who misses you?" And she didn't even look at the screen. She just stared at me and said, "You're embarrassing yourself now." Like the message didn't exist, like I hadn't just watched it appear. I asked her again, louder this time, and she snapped back instantly, "It's not what you think," which is the kind of sentence that only ever means exactly what you think. And when I called her out on that, she rolled her eyes and laughed under her breath like I was exhausting her. "God, you're so predictable," she said, pushing past me toward the sink, grabbing a glass like she needed water more than she needed to explain why another person was texting her that. "You see one message and suddenly you've built this whole story in your head." I followed her, my chest tight, my hands shaking, and said, "Then tell me the real story." And she turned around so fast, the glass hit the counter harder than it should have. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp now, controlled but cutting. "It's someone I talk to sometimes, someone who actually listens to me without interrogating me like I'm on trial every time I breathe." She said it like it was justified, like I had pushed her into this, like I was the reason there was another person in our marriage. I felt something collapse in me hearing that, but I forced myself to stay focused and ask the only thing that mattered. "Is it him?" And I didn't even have to say my brother's name this time. She went still for half a second, then shook her head immediately, too quickly, and said, "No, stop trying to make that a thing." It's pathetic, but her eyes didn't match her voice, and that disconnect was worse than any confession. I told her to open the messages, all of them, right there in front of me, and she just stared at me like I had asked for something unreasonable, something insane. "I'm not handing you my entire life because you're having a meltdown," she said, her tone cold again, distant, like she had already stepped out of this relationship emotionally and was just dealing with the inconvenience of me catching up to it. Then she crossed her arms and said something that I don't think I will ever be able to forget, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because of how calm she was when she said it. "Maybe if you paid attention to me like you do to your suspicions, I wouldn't need someone else to talk to." Someone else. Not a misunderstanding, not a mistake, someone else. And right as I was trying to process that, trying to decide if I was about to lose my mind or my marriage, there was a knock at the door. 3 slow, familiar knocks. the exact way my brother always knocks. Those 3 knocks didn't just sound familiar. They felt like something inside my chest, collapsing in real time, like my body recognized the truth before my mind could catch up to it. I didn't move at first. I just stood there staring at her, waiting for her to react. And she didn't look surprised. She didn't look confused. She looked irritated, like the timing was inconvenient. Then she exhaled slowly and said, "Don't do this," under her breath, not even looking at me anymore. I walked to the door anyway because I needed to see it with my own eyes, needed to remove any last piece of doubt I was clinging to. And when I opened it, there he was, my brother, standing there like it was any other night, holding a 6-pack, already halfway smiling before he saw my face. That smile faded almost instantly, and for a second we just stared at each other in this silence that felt louder than anything we had said inside. "Hey," he said, slower now, cautious, like he had just walked into something he didn't expect, and I stepped aside without saying a word, letting him in, because part of me needed to see how far this went, how deep this actually was. He walked past me, his eyes flicking toward her, and the way they looked at each other wasn't normal. It wasn't casual. It wasn't anything you could explain away with jokes or excuses. It was recognition, tension, something already built between them that didn't include me. I closed the door behind him and said, "Perfect timing," and he let out a small laugh like he thought I was joking, like this was still salvageable with normal conversation. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. And she was already moving, stepping in before I could answer, her voice soft again, controlled, stepping into that version of herself that made everything sound reasonable. "He's just had a long day," she said, placing a hand lightly on his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world, like I wasn't standing right there watching it. That small touch hit me harder than anything else because it wasn't accidental. It wasn't hesitant. It was familiar. I said his name again, louder this time, and asked him directly, "Why does she have a second phone?" And he blinked, confused for a second, then looked at her, not me, like he was waiting for instructions, like she was the one he needed to follow in this moment. That was it for me. I stepped forward, holding up the phone, and said, "Why is someone texting my wife that they miss her, and why did she panic when she saw your name?" And his face changed, not dramatically, just enough, just a flicker of something guilty that he tried to bury immediately. "You're reading into things," he said quickly, too quickly, and I felt this wave of anger rise up so fast it almost made me dizzy. Then she cut in, sharper now, defensive in a way that felt targeted, like she was protecting him, not herself. "Stop it," she snapped. "You're turning nothing into something and dragging him into your issues. Your issues. Like this was all mine, like I created this, like I was the problem in a situation that was unfolding right in front of me." I looked at both of them, really looked this time, and said, "Then one of you explain it." And neither of them answered right away. They just stood there in this tense silence, and that silence said more than anything they could have come up with. And then my brother finally spoke, but not to confess, not to deny, just to say something that made everything worse. "Maybe we should all calm down before this gets out of hand." The second he said that, something inside me snapped into clarity, not rage, not panic, just this cold, steady understanding that they were already on the same side and I was the outsider in my own home. I looked at him and said, "Out of hand?" Like I couldn't believe those were the words he chose, and he held his hands up slightly, calm, controlled, like he was trying to manage a situation instead of explain it. "Yeah," he said, glancing at her again before finishing. "You're upset, you're jumping to conclusions, let's just talk this through." That glance destroyed whatever was left of me that still wanted to believe this wasn't real. He wasn't looking at me for reassurance. He was checking her, syncing with her, making sure they were aligned. I turned to her and asked, "How long?" And she didn't answer right away, just sighed like I was exhausting her, like this was an inconvenience she didn't want to deal with tonight. "You're not even asking the right questions," she said quietly, shaking her head. I laughed again, that same hollow sound, and said, "Then help me out, because from where I'm standing, my wife has a secret phone, another man is texting her that he misses her, and my own brother walks in like he belongs here." And she flinched at that last part, just slightly, but enough. He stepped forward then, closer to me, lowering his voice like he was trying to reason with me. "It's not what you think," he said, and I cut him off immediately. "Then say what it is." He hesitated. That hesitation felt louder than any confession. She stepped in again, faster this time, almost protective, placing herself slightly between us without making it obvious, and said, "Nothing happened the way you're imagining it. You're twisting things because you want a reason to be angry." I stared at her and said, "I don't need a reason, I have evidence." Holding up the phone again, and this time she didn't try to grab it. She just looked at it like she had already accepted that part was out. Then I asked the question I didn't want the answer to. "Did you meet him tonight?" Silence. Not confusion, not denial. Silence. My brother looked away first. That was all I needed. I felt this wave hit me, not explosive, just heavy, like everything I thought I knew about my life was collapsing quietly in front of me, and I said, "You were with him." More statement than question, and she finally spoke, but not to admit it, not to apologize, just to redirect it again. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." Not, "It's not true," not "You're wrong." Just that. And somehow that hurt worse than anything else. I took a step back, looking between them, trying to understand how far this went, how long I had been the only one who didn't know, and I asked, "Does anyone else know?" And this time both of them reacted at once, too fast, too defensive, and I realized in that moment this wasn't just a secret between them. It was something bigger. And then she said quietly, almost like a warning, "You really don't want to start pulling on that thread." The way she said that made my stomach drop because it wasn't defensive anymore. It wasn't reactive. It sounded like someone trying to stop me from opening something that couldn't be closed again. I stared at her and said, "Too late." And for the first time that night, I saw something close to fear in her eyes. Not for what she had done, but for what I might uncover. My brother shifted beside her, running a hand over his face, and muttered, "This isn't the time." Like there was ever going to be a better moment for this kind of truth. I stepped closer, lowering my voice because suddenly it didn't feel like shouting would get me anything anymore. "Who else knows?" I asked again, slower this time. And she shook her head like she was disappointed in me, like I was the one breaking something fragile. "You're blowing this up into something it doesn't have to be," she said, and I couldn't help it. I just stared at her in disbelief and said, "You keep saying that while standing next to him," and she didn't even move away from him. That silence between them stretched again, but this time it felt different, heavier, like a decision was being made without me. Then my brother finally spoke, but his voice had changed. It wasn't calm anymore. It was careful. "Look," he said, "you're not wrong to feel blindsided." And that word hit me hard because it meant he knew exactly what this was, and he was choosing his words to soften it instead of deny it. I turned to him and said, "Then don't soften it, say it." My chest felt tight, like I was bracing for impact, and he looked at her one more time before speaking, like he needed permission, and that was the moment I think I lost whatever respect I had left for him. He exhaled slowly and said, "It didn't start the way you think." And I laughed again, shaking my head, because that is always how these things begin, with excuses dressed up as explanations. "How did it start then?" I asked. And before he could answer, she cut in sharply, "Stop it, both of you, this isn't helping." And I turned on her immediately. "Helping who? Because it's definitely not me." Her jaw tightened, and for a second the mask slipped completely, and I saw the anger underneath, raw and unfiltered. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice low and steady. "Fine. You stopped being present a long time ago. You just didn't notice." That hit deeper than I expected, not because I believed it, but because she believed it, or at least needed to believe it to justify whatever this had become. I shook my head slowly and said, "So you replaced me." And she didn't deny it. She just looked away for the first time all night. That was worse than any confession. Then my brother added, almost quietly, like he was trying to ease it in, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." And I felt something cold settle in my chest, because that meant it had gone further than I even understood. I looked at both of them and asked, "How far is far?" And neither of them answered right away. But the silence this time wasn't just guilt. It was calculation. And then she said something that made everything feel even more twisted than I was prepared for. "You think this is just about him, but it's not." When she said that, it didn't feel like a confession. It felt like the ground shifting under me, like everything I thought I was dealing with was just the surface of something deeper. I stared at her and said, "Then what is it about?" And she didn't answer right away, just looked at my brother again, that same silent exchange passing between them, and I realized I wasn't just being lied to anymore. I was being managed. "Say it," I pushed, my voice quieter now, almost steady, because the anger had burned into something colder. "If this isn't just about him, then what else have you been hiding?" She exhaled slowly, like she was deciding how much damage she was willing to let happen in one moment, and then she said, "You've been gone longer than you think." And I actually took a step back, because I had no idea what that was supposed to mean. "I've been right here," I said, my voice tightening. "In this apartment, in this marriage." And she shook her head, almost pitying, which made it worse. "Physically, sure," she replied. "But everything else? You checked out a long time ago. I tried to tell you, I tried to get your attention, and you just stayed the same." She said it like she was explaining something obvious, something I should have already understood, like my absence justified everything standing in front of me. My brother stepped in again, softer this time, like he was trying to stabilize the situation instead of inflame it. "It didn't happen overnight," he said, and I snapped my head toward him, because the fact that he felt comfortable explaining my marriage to me was almost unbearable. "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "You don't get to narrate this like you're some outside observer." He flinched at that, but didn't argue, and that silence from him told me more than any words could have. I turned back to her and said, "So what? You were unhappy. So you started—" "What? Talking to him behind my back?" And she shook her head again, more firmly this time. "It wasn't just talking," she said, and the way she said it, calm, direct, stripped of excuses, made my chest tighten. I swallowed hard and asked, "Then what was it?" Even though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer anymore. She looked at me for a long second and then said quietly, "It started as something I didn't plan, and then it became something I didn't stop." That sentence echoed in my head, because it wasn't an apology. It wasn't even regret. It was just acceptance. I felt my hands curl into fists without realizing it and asked, "And you thought I'd never find out?" And she didn't even hesitate this time. "I thought you wouldn't look," she said, and that hurt more than anything else, because it meant she didn't just betray me, she underestimated me. I let out a slow breath, trying to hold on to whatever control I had left, and asked one last question, the one that felt like it might finally define everything. "Was it just the two of you?" And for the first time all night, neither of them answered right away. They just looked at each other, and that silence told me the answer was worse than anything I had imagined. That silence stretched just a second too long, and in that second, everything inside me locked into place like a final piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. I didn't need them to answer anymore, but I still asked, because hearing it out loud felt like the only way to make it real. "How many?" I said, my voice low, controlled in a way that scared even me. She looked away first this time, not at him, away. And that was when I knew it wasn't just betrayal. It was something layered, something ongoing, something that had been growing while I was still living inside the version of our life that no longer existed. My brother finally spoke, But his voice didn't have that careful tone anymore. It sounded tired, almost resigned. "It's not like that," he said, and I felt this sharp, bitter reaction rise up because that sentence meant nothing now. "Then make it make sense," I shot back, stepping closer, and this time neither of them backed up. She straightened slightly, like she had made a decision, and said, "You want the truth? Fine, it wasn't planned, and it didn't start with him." My heart actually skipped, like it didn't know how to process that. "What does that even mean?" I asked, and she looked at me with this strange calm, like she had accepted the damage already. "It started months ago," she said slowly, "with someone from work. I was talking to him because I felt invisible at home, and it just went further than it should have." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady myself, but she kept going, like once she started, she couldn't stop. "That ended," she added quickly, "but not because of you, because I got caught up in something else." I opened my eyes and looked at my brother, and he didn't look at me this time, he just stared at the floor. "And then him," I said quietly, almost to myself, and she nodded, not ashamed, just factual. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she repeated, but now it sounded weaker, like even she knew how empty that was. I let out a breath that felt like it had been stuck in my chest for hours and said, "So this isn't one mistake," and she shook her head slightly. "No," she admitted, "it's not." That word hung there. Final. Then I asked the question that had been building underneath everything else, the one that felt like it might finally break whatever was left of me. "And you were just going to keep doing this? Keep lying to me, smiling at me, sleeping next to me like none of this existed?" She hesitated, just for a second, and then she said, "I didn't think you'd ever see it." Not regret, not guilt, just that. I looked at both of them, at my wife and my brother, standing there together in a reality I had been excluded from, and I realized something that made everything feel even colder. This didn't just happen. They built it, right in front of me, and I never even saw the beginning.